Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, Prayers by Queen Kunti, text number 19. Maya Jana Nikachanam Agya Dokshajam Avyayam Nalakshase Mudadrisha Nato Nat Yadaro Yata Maya Javani Kachanam Agyadokshajam Avyayam Nalakshase Mudadrisha Nato Natyadaro Yata Ladies. Maya, deluding, Javanika, curtain, Achanam, covered by, Agya, ignorant, Adokshajam, beyond the range of material conception, transcendental, Avyayam, irreproachable, not, Lakshase, observed, Mudadrisha, by the foolish observer, Nataha, artist, Natyadara, dressed as a player, Yata, as. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Being beyond the range of limited sense perception, you are eternally irreproachable factor covered by the curtain of deluding energy. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized. Please repeat. Being beyond the range of limited sense perception, you're eternally irreproachable factor, covered by the curtain of deluding energy. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna affirms that less intelligent persons mistake him to be like an ordinary man just like us, and thus they deride him. The same is confirmed herein by Queen Kunti. The less intelligent persons are those who rebel against the authority of the Lord. Such persons are known as asuras. The asuras cannot recognize the Lord's authority. And the Lord himself appears amongst us as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, or in his original form as Krishna, he performs many wonderful acts which are humanly impossible. As we shall find in the 10th canto of this great literature, Lord Sri Krishna exhibited his humanly impossible activities even from the days of his lying on the lap of his mother. He killed the Putana witch, although she smeared her breast with poison, just to kill the Lord. The Lord sucked her breast like a natural baby, and he sucked out her very life also. Similarly, he lifted the Govardhan hill, just as a boy picks up a frog's umbrella, and stood several days continuously just to give protection to the residents of Vrindavana. These are some of the superhuman activities the Lord described in the authoritative Vedic literatures, like the Puranas, Itihasas, histories, and Upanishads. He has delivered wonderful instructions in the shape of the Bhagavad Gita. He has shown marvelous capacities as a hero, as a householder, as a teacher, and as a renouncer. He is accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead by such authoritative personalities as Vyas, Devala, Asita, Narada, Madhva, Sankara, Ramanuja, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and all other authorities in the line. He himself is declared as such in many places through the authentic literatures. And yet there is a class of men with demoniac mentality who are always reluctant to accept the Lord as the supreme absolute truth. This is partially due to their poor fund of knowledge, partially due to their stubborn obstinacy, which results from various misdeeds in the past and present. Such persons could not recognize the Lord, Sri Krishna, even when he's present before them. Another difficulty is that those who depend on their imperfect senses cannot realize him as the Supreme Lord. Such persons are like the modern scientists. They want to know everything by their experimental knowledge. But it's not possible to know the Supreme Person by imperfect experimental knowledge. He's described herein as adokshija, or beyond the range of experimental knowledge. All our senses are imperfect. We claim to observe everything and anything. We must admit that we can observe things under certain material conditions only, which are beyond our control. The Lord is beyond the observation of sense perception. Queen Kunti accepts this deficiency of the conditioned soul, especially the women class, or less intelligent. For less intelligent men, there must be such things as temples, mosques, or churches, so they may begin to recognize the authority of the Lord and hear about him from authorities in such holy places. For the less intelligent men, this beginning of spiritual life is essential, and only foolish men decry the establishment of such places of worship, which are required to raise the standard of spiritual attributes for the mass of people. For less intelligent persons, bowing down before the authority of the Lord, generally done in the temples, mosques, or churches, is as beneficial as it is for the advanced devotees to meditate upon him by active service. Maya jamani kachanam agyana ada dokshidam avyam na lakshase mudadrisha nato natyatar dara yata nato natyadaro yata. Being beyond the range of limited sense perception, you're eternally irreproachable factor covered by the curtain of deluding energy. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswatunde Ve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadya Desadarne. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says, Naham prakasha sarvasha yogamaya samavrita mudoyam navijananti lokayam ajam avyam. That I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my eternal creative potency, yogamaya, and so the deluded world knows me not. I'm unborn and inexhaustible. Modern society, so-called society, then we take our standards according to what the mass of people think is valid. So similarly, somehow or another, this idea of pradyaksha and anuman has become practically the only standard of proof. For modern people, they always want to have it confirmed by experimental knowledge. Although their experiments are always coming up with different results. They try the best they can to find out some knowledge, but it always turns out to be untrue in the long run. Because they think that, especially when they're measuring human behavior, they think that there's some kind of way they can standardize it. There is a way of standardizing it to some extent, but they don't understand the unlimited varieties of the three modes of material nature, which are manifesting themselves, these modes are manifesting in different varieties of existence in the material world. But because they want to take the position of the Supreme, therefore they imagine that they're actually gaining some knowledge, but all they're doing is finding out what they don't know. They never find out what they know. Every experiment they do generally comes up with another answer. And then they find out that what they thought was true before has now become false. Therefore, some years ago, there was an article in one magazine. It said that we've learned more about the sun than all the other planets in the whole universe. We've been studying it for 10 years. Unfortunately, we've just discovered that everything we thought we knew about the sun was wrong. But don't worry, it said in the same article, we have positive proof of the possible existence of black holes. So, in other words, by word jugglery, people have become bewildered. Confused, because they're meant to be confused. Because Krishna says, Jayato Vishayam Pumsam, Sangas Te Shupajayate, Sangas Chanjayate Kama, Kama Krudo Vijayate. That when we contemplate the objects of the senses, then we become attached to them. And by such attachment, lust comes. From lust comes anger, and then Krodad Bhavati Samoha. Samaha Smriti Vibram Sat, Smriti Vibram Sat Buddhinasho, Buddhinashat Pranashide. From anger comes delusion. Now all of us are in delusion. If we're not self-realized, that means we're in delusion. We're all misidentifying ourselves either with the gross body or the subtle one. That's called delusion. We're no more this body than we are the good fairy. Because we're in love with our body, we think it's the good fairy already. Or maybe some people think that they're the wicked witch and they like being that too. In any case, it's just a misidentification. We're no more the wicked witch of the West, or the East, or the South, or the North. Or we're no longer we're not good fairy in any direction either. We're not this present identity that we're identifying ourselves with, that we invested so much energy in, so much desires, so much false ego, but it's a false identification. And is it that Krishna says when Naham Prakashas, uncover them with my illusory energy? Does that mean that Krishna doesn't like us, so therefore he covers us with the illusion? No, we voluntarily choose to be covered by the illusory energy, by our own personal attachments and desires. Therefore, sattvam rajas tamayiti guna prakriti sambhava ivanati mahavaho dehe dehinam avya. The material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with these modes, he becomes conditioned by them. In other words, we want to be in the material energy. Of course, that's due to the fact that we don't know what the spiritual energy is like. We have to be in some energy. We have to be somewhere. And we don't know what the spiritual energy is, then we become attached to the material energy. But we do know that, at least in the human form of life, at least when we hear from scriptures, we may not be completely free from the bodily concept of life, but we know that there's three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance. We can choose to wash our hands before we eat and after we eat, or we can be lazy and just find the nearest pillow and take shelter. That's our choice. We can do either one or the other. So one of them will lead to the mode of ignorance, and the other one will lead to the mode of goodness. That's our choice. Now, we may not realize Krishna is the Supreme Lord, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada talks about how the Bhagavad Gita, the Gita Upanishad, is the best of all the different scriptures. But one lady asked Srila Prabhupada to recommend an edition of the Bhagavad Gita in English that she could read. And Prabhupada said, actually I can't recommend any edition of the Bhagavad Gita, both in America or in India, because the commentators have not touched on the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita. They've given their own interpretation of what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. Because basically the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada said, is basically speaking that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's what the whole Gita is about. If you miss that, then you miss the whole point. You can miss other things, but if you miss that, then reading the Bhagavad Gita has no value. Therefore, Krishna speaks to Arjuna in the battlefield Kurukshetra, Bhagavad Gita, and it's supposed to be passed down in this succession. But the basic point is that, at least theoretically, we should accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And with that submissive spirit, we can actually derive from benefit from hearing Bhagavad Gita. Now, Bhagavad Gita is a science. It's not a question that we're blindly following theoretically that Krishna is God. The fact is, one thing we can find out immediately is that we're an illusion. Now, if we don't keep in the forefront of our consciousness the fact that presently we're an illusion, that means we're going to stay an illusion. If we don't accept that actually I'm in an unfortunate position, being bound up by the three modes of material nature, imprisoned in the material body, which is going through the different miseries of material existence, and as long as I misidentify myself with this body, then I'm going to continuously take one body after another, both in this life and in the future. The result of that is I'm going to continuously suffer all the miseries of material existence, and which are many. On the other hand, if I theoretically, by knowledge, recognize Krishna, what he said that I can understand at least. Krishna said the body is changing, but we're not changing. So it means he's an authority. He's telling the truth. And anyone who's repeating the same message also becomes an authority. Now, this authority is not just, you've been appointed when you go up to someone and say, my dear sir, your body's changing. Because I've been appointed to say that. So it's a reality. Everyone could be appointed to say that, because it's real. It's not that you have to go through a ceremony, sit in a fire, sacrifice, throw grains into the fire, and then you become authorized to tell people your body's changing. Then what you say is true now. Otherwise, if you're not going through the fire sacrifice, getting anointed with the sword, to preach this message, then when you tell someone your body's changing, then that's not true enough for them. Their bodies are not changing. But the soul within the body is the same. This is knowledge. It's reality. Anyone can say it. Generally, we don't expect the animals to preach like that. But the human beings can preach like that because it's real. And it's a fundamental principle that can change people's existence from the three modes to transcendence. In other words, if one gets a little interest, well, if I'm eternal and I'm struggling so hard to survive in the material world, maybe I should try to realize I'm eternal, then I won't have to struggle so hard. If I actually realize I'm not this body, then I won't be afraid of anything anymore, what happens to the body. Now, of course, we spend our lives having locks on our door, taking our vitamin pills, going for a walk in Tivoli Park, whatever, to protect our body, to make sure it stays for at least as long as feasible in this world. But ultimately, we're all defeated. Pravastava devoda jata, yavana jignasitatva tattvam, yavan kriyastava didomanova, karmatmaka yena sharira bandhaha. Material nature's illusory energy is meant to defeat the soul and keep it in bondage. It can be let out of bondage if it wants, like a bird in a cage. You open the cage of the bird walks out of the cage for a little while. It gets fearful. It thinks it needs the shelter of the cage, and so it gets back into the cage without even, could fly away, but it's afraid that it might not be protected by the cage. So it gets back into the cage, and then the owner shuts the cage and he's entrapped. But he voluntarily is trapped. Similarly, because we think we need this body, or we have some special interest in this body, or this body is going to fulfill our desires, therefore we remain in the ignorant misconception that Krishna is not the supreme. Krishna can't tell me what to do. I'm free to do what my mind and senses tell me to do. If they dictate, then I must follow, because I'm a surrendered soul. Not to Krishna, but to my imagination of identifying with this body, gross and subtle. Therefore, one has to study, has to become convinced that we're eternal souls, and that there's a guide within our heart giving us intelligence, and he wants to give us spiritual intelligence. Paramatma. There's a guide who's speaking to us, giving us intelligence, but he's giving everyone intelligence, either how to gratify their senses, or how to get out of the material concepts of life. Now, for the ordinary person, they have no idea that they're in the bodily concept of life. What to speak of trying to get out of it? And even if they want to get out of it, they're trying by Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Stanga Yoga, to get out of the bodily concept of life, but it doesn't ultimately work very well. Therefore, Tesham Sadatam Yuktanam Bhajantam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhiyogam Tam Yena Mam Upiyantite. That we have to surrender to Krishna. Well, how? Utilize his energies in his service and understand him properly. Accept that our relation with him and try to act accordingly with enthusiasm. Otherwise, if we don't, then we'll think we're the controllers, we're the enjoyers, and we're the friend of others rather than Krishna. And then we'll try to enjoy on the gross or subtle platform here in the material world. But if we constantly engage in devotional service as much as possible, with enthusiasm, worshiping Krishna with love, then Dadami Buddha Yogam Tam. He gives us spiritual intelligence, so gradually our misconceptions are cleared away. And when they're cleared away, we don't get 4 heads and 8 arms. We just see things properly as it really is. Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastani Shuni Chaiva Svapake Cha Pandita Samadarshana. Then we see everyone is an eternal servant of Krishna, including myself. Therefore, there's no question of becoming anyone's lord or enjoyer or even friend. It's Krishna who's directing me how to help people understand that they're not the enjoyer, controller, or friend. That Krishna is the controller, enjoyer, and friend of everyone, including me and you and everyone. So that's knowledge, and if we understand that, Paramatma, understand that the universe is being controlled by intelligence under superior direction. It is not by accident the sun comes up exactly on time and goes down exactly in time, because Krishna is doing it. He's controlling he's in the heart of the demigods. Yo yam 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 tanum bhakta. Shari architam ichami. Tasya tasyasram sharam tam eva vididaniham. He's not only in our heart, he's in the heart of Brahma. Therefore, when it says in the Brahma Samhita that the Supreme Lord is the eye of, the sun is the eye of the Supreme Lord. Brahmati Kala Chakra, Sambrita Kala Chakra. And he's moving the sun in its orbit. Does anyone know the first word of that verse from Brahma Samhita? Sambrita Kala Chakra, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamahang Bhajami. Yes, yeah. Kala Chakra, yes. Anyhow, it's also in Bhagavad Gita. Anyhow, it says that Krishna, the sun is the eye of the Supreme Lord. And that by his will, the sun is put in its orbit exactly in time. Therefore, this is observable. Otherwise, what is the explanation? By accident? Can you throw a bunch of dust in the air and then it'll circulate the room here every day, now until time immemorial? No, even you want to make a little model of the universe, it takes intelligence. What to speak of the universe? Have you ever seen a model of the universe just kind of like manifest itself out of nowhere? How can if a model can't manifest itself out of nowhere, how can a whole universe manifest itself out of nowhere? Therefore, if we read Bhagavad Gita, then we'll see with eyes of knowledge, but eyes of knowledge are not sufficient. Then we have to work with the eyes of knowledge. We have to follow the instructions, what says in Bhagavad Gita. Then Krishna says, then he reveals himself. Siddhami buddhi yogam tam tesham eva nukampartam. Even appears within our heart. Not only gives us intelligence, how to do devotional service with more enthusiasm, more steadiness, but he also reveals himself within the heart, so gradually we can feel his presence in the form of his name, his form, his quality, and his pastimes. And the heart becomes progressively purified and ecstatic. We can feel the ecstasy, the love being with Krishna. So that's up to everyone to try to understand what our present position is with intelligence. People may think we're sentimental religionists or we're fanatics, whatever, but actually we're the only scientists in this world. Everyone else is just a fool and an ignorance. Unless we understand Krishna, then ultimately Krishna says we're mudhas. We're on the level of a cow and ass, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's not that Srimad Bhagavatam takes pleasure in demeaning people, trying to criticize them, trying to put them down. That's just the reality. If you go up to a dog and say, my dear dog, you're a dog, is that insulting the dog? Will the dog feel insulted, go home and tell its mother, make a court case against you because you defamed him, calling him a dog? Now, if people don't understand who they are, they're on the level of the dog, that's all. If they don't understand that their body's changing and that they're not changing, they're the soul, and they want to claim themselves learned scholars, worthy of respect by others, then they're just fools, actually. They're just playthings in the hands of the illusory energy, claiming themselves to be something significant. Well, actually, they're simply misleaders like everyone else in material consciousness. Therefore, even the most simple devotee who knows that they're not their body is millions of times more intelligent than a person who's completely in ignorance, claiming himself to be a scholar, and claiming himself to have so many degrees. As that boatman, probably like that story. There was a boatman in India, and in Bengal especially, there's so many waterways, so they use the water very much. So one scholar, after doing a conference, was on the boat with the boatman. And the boatman, the scholar was looking at the stars and saying, "My dear boatman, do you see these stars? Do you know which stars are what?" The boatman said, "I'm just a boatman. How would I know? I have no education." So the scholar said, 25% of your life is wasted. And then looking at the shore, there were so many different trees and plants. And the scholar said, "Do you know which all these different trees and plants are? Which ones are which? What their properties are?" And the boatman said, "Well, I'm just an ordinary boatman. How would I know these things? I have no education." And then some clouds. And so the scholar said, 50% of your life is wasted. So the clouds on the sky, black clouds. Yes, unfortunately not. So then there was a big rain coming down. The boat was filled with water. And the scholar jumped into the water and was about to be drowned, and the boatman said, 100% of your life is wasted. So if we don't know reality, the basic reality, then we're just wasting our lives. And therefore, to give people intelligence so they can understand the most basic things, we chant Hare Krishna. Because in association with Krishna, people may wake up to to come to the level of human being and be able to understand the most basic principle of reality and therefore take to devotional service to Krishna. It's not an option. It's the only safe path. Otherwise, people's lives are not only in danger, but they're just wasting their lives. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna. Because you said we don't need a yagya before repeating the words of Krishna, but isn't it sometimes devotees repeat some words of Krishna, but isn't it better if they do so under the guidance of...
Well, they're not the words of Krishna. Krishna is in our heart. He's telling us what to say. And we just say something different, then that's not Krishna speaking. If you go up to tell someone your body's changing, we're not changing, that is Krishna saying. What else? What are they going to say? So every other Monday your body doesn't change. So we repeat the basic words of Bhagavad Gita, then that's Krishna's words. As far as adding anything or taking anything away, that's not Krishna's words. That's illusory energy speaking. That's the modes of nature. Anything else? Wala Grantaraya Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribo. Om Vishnu Radha